Alone on the dirt road, the little Mustang neighed desperately. When someone finally stopped, no one could hold back the tears. The frost-coated windows of the old trailer caught the first weak rays of dawn. Inside, 17-year-old Jaden Whitecloud shivered under a thin blanket, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. His eyes opened to darkness, the ritual of early waking ingrained after years of necessity. Reaching out, his fingers found the small framed photograph on the crate that served as his nightstand. "Morning, grandmother," he whispered, touching the image of Nita Whitecloud's weathered face. Her eyes crinkled in a smile that had always felt like home. 6 months gone, but the emptiness remained as raw as the day they'd buried her. Jaden swung his feet onto the cold linoleum floor and reached for the space heater, his one luxury, bought secondhand from a pawn shop in Flagstaff. The trailer creaked around him as it slowly warmed, the metal contracting and expanding like a living thing. Outside, the vast Arizona sky was beginning to lighten from black to deep indigo. By the time he'd pulled on his worn jeans, flannel shirt, and the only coat he owned, a second-hand Carhartt with frayed cuffs, the digital clock read 5:15, just enough time to make it to Silverado Ranch for the morning shift. The ranch owners didn't care that he was underage. They paid cash, asked no questions, and expected him to work like a man twice his size. As he boiled water for instant coffee, Jaden's eyes drifted to the small wooden flute resting on the windowsill. His grandmother had carved it from cedar, teaching him the songs of their ancestors in quiet evenings by the fire. "Music speaks when words fail," she'd told him. "And some creatures understand music better than they understand people." The memory brought others cascading after it, his father's broad shoulders as he walked away down the dusty road to the power plant. The last time Jaden would ever see him alive. The screeching tires, the crumpled body, the officer at the door looking anywhere but at Jaden's 12-year-old face as he delivered the news. After that came the slow disappearance of his mother, first into bottles, then pills, finally vanishing altogether one winter morning, leaving only a scribbled note and the scent of cheap perfume that faded within days. Jaden shook his head, forcing the memories away. Dwelling on ghosts wouldn't pay the electric bill or put food in the ancient refrigerator that hummed erratically in the corner. He grabbed his thermos and stepped outside, where his 1992 Ford F-150 waited, its once red paint now a patchwork of rust and primer. The engine coughed reluctantly to life on the third try. "Just a little longer, old girl," he murmured, patting the cracked dashboard. "Need you to hang on just a little longer." At Silverado Ranch, the morning unfolded in its usual rhythm. Jaden mucked stalls, filled water troughs, and distributed hay to the 30-odd horses that comprised the ranch's boarding and training operation. He worked silently, efficiently, the horses watching him with pricked ears and attentive eyes. "Hey, Chief, that stall clean enough to eat off yet?" Billy Harrison's mocking voice carried across the barn aisle. The older ranch hand leaned against a stall door, a cigarette dangling from his lips despite the strict no-smoking policy. Jaden kept working, his face impassive. He'd learned early that responding only encouraged more taunts. "Hey, I'm talking to you, Indian Whisperer," Billy persisted, flicking ash onto the freshly swept concrete. "Heard you talking to Firecracker yesterday. What were you doing, asking him about the weather on the Spirit Plane?" Two other ranch hands snickered nearby. Jaden straightened, pitchfork in hand, and turned to face Billy. "Just telling him to watch out for snakes in his stall," he said quietly, his dark eyes meeting Billy's pale blue ones. "Some of them wear boots and smoke where they shouldn't." Billy's face darkened, but before he could respond, Ray Jenkins, the ranch foreman, entered the barn. "Harrison, break's over. Those paddocks won't clean themselves." Jenkins glanced at Jaden. "Whitecloud, when you're done here, Dr. Sanchez needs help with the new mare. Says she won't let anyone near her." Jaden nodded, returning to his work. This was familiar ground. The troubled horses, the ones that flinched at human touch or lashed out in fear, were always eventually assigned to him. The ranch hands might mock his Indian magic, but Jenkins knew results when he saw them. An hour later, Jaden stood outside a round pen where a bay mare paced nervously, nostrils flared and eyes wide. Dr. Sanchez, the ranch veterinarian, waited impatiently. "She needs antibiotics, but I can't get within 10 feet, the vet explained. "Owner says she was fine until a trailer accident last month. Now she's dangerous." Jaden nodded, studying the mare's movement patterns. "She's not dangerous. She's terrified." He opened the gate slowly, stepped inside, and then did something that made Dr. Sanchez frown in confusion. He sat down cross-legged in the dirt, his back to the mare, and began to hum softly. For nearly 20 minutes, Jaden didn't move. He hummed an old Navajo melody his grandmother had taught him, one about rivers finding their way home to the sea. Eventually, the sound of the mare's anxious pacing slowed. Jaden felt the weight of her attention on his back but didn't turn. "Animals understand intention better than words," his grandmother had told him. "Be still enough, and they'll read what's in your heart." When he finally heard the soft snort behind him, Jaden slowly turned his head. The mare stood 10 feet away, ears forward, watching him with cautious curiosity instead of panic. "There you are," he murmured. "I see you now." By the time Dr. Sanchez administered the antibiotics, the mare was allowing Jaden to stroke her neck, her large brown eyes half closed in tentative trust. "I don't know how you do it," the vet admitted, packing away his supplies. "But whatever it is, keep doing it." The day dragged into evening, heavy clouds gathering over the San Francisco peaks to the north. By the time Jaden clocked out, rain was falling in earnest, drumming against the roof of his truck as he pulled onto Route 66 for the drive home. The headlights of the old Ford cut weakly through the darkness, illuminating the rain-slicked asphalt. Jaden drove cautiously, the windshield wipers squeaking as they struggled against the downpour. His body ached from the day's labor, but his mind was already calculating which bills could wait another week and which couldn't. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed it. A flash of pale gold in the beam of his headlights, something on the shoulder of the road that didn't belong there. Jaden slowed, peering through the rain-streaked windshield. A horse. A young one, maybe a yearling, collapsed on the gravel shoulder. Jaden pulled over immediately, heart pounding. He grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the rain, instantly soaked as he approached the fallen animal. In the flashlight's beam, he could see it was a Mustang colt, its golden coat darkened by rain and mud. As Jaden drew closer, the animal struggled to rise, revealing deep lacerations on its hind legs and what looked horribly like rope burns around its neck. Despite its obvious weakness, the colt bared its teeth, eyes rolling white with terror. "Easy," Jaden breathed, stopping several yards away. "Easy there." The colt collapsed again, a sound escaping its throat that struck Jaden like a physical blow. Not quite a whinny, not quite a scream, but something in between that spoke of pain and desperation. Crouching down to appear less threatening, Jaden directed his flashlight beam more carefully over the Mustang's body. That's when he saw it. A brand on the animal's flank, partially obscured by mud but unmistakable to anyone who worked with horses in the area. The stylized M.E. of Montgomery Enterprises, Charles Montgomery, the Texas oil tycoon who'd been buying up land around Flagstaff, including parcels of ancestral Navajo territory. The man whose company had recently been granted controversial permits to manage wild Mustang populations on federal lands, a euphemism that locals knew meant capturing the horses and selling them at private auctions. The most valuable went to wealthy collectors. The rest, rumor had it, to slaughterhouses across the Mexican border. This colt, with its unusual golden coat marked by white stockings, would have been in the valuable category, but something had clearly gone wrong. An escape, perhaps, or an accident during transport. When Jaden tried to edge closer, the colt lunged despite its injuries, teeth snapping at the air. Recognizing the futility of direct approach, Jaden retreated to sit on the wet gravel several yards away. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead and soaked through his clothes. but he didn't move. Instead, he began to sing softly in Navajo, an ancient song his grandmother had taught him about spirits that run free with the wind. Shiu ya atee, he murmured between verses. I am not here to hurt you. For almost an hour, Jaden remained there in the rain, singing to the injured Mustang. Occasionally cars passed, their headlights briefly illuminating the strange tableau before disappearing into the night. No one stopped. Shi dao danihi outso wago anid ako danihi outso danihi diu, he said quietly. I know what it is to be broken and thrown away. I know what it is when they try to erase who you really are. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, something shifted in the colt's posture. Its breathing, which had been rapid and shallow, began to synchronize with the cadence of Jaden's song. Its ears, previously pinned back in aggression, now flickered forward occasionally, catching the unfamiliar sounds. Still singing, Jaden slowly reached into his backpack and withdrew a small container of water. He placed it on the asphalt, gently pushing it toward the colt before retreating again. The Mustang watched the movement with deep suspicion, but thirst eventually overcame fear. After long minutes, it dragged itself painfully toward the water and drank. When it finished, it raised its head, and for the first time its gaze met Jaden's without hostility. A fleeting moment of recognition between two abandoned souls. I'm going to call you Spirit, Jaden said softly, because that's what I see in you. A spirit that refuses to be broken. The rain had lessened to a drizzle. Moving with deliberate slowness, Jaden removed his flannel shirt, leaving him in just a t-shirt against the cool night air. Tearing the flannel into strips, he fashioned a makeshift bandage. This will help with the bleeding until I can do better, he explained, as if the colt could understand every word. I need to touch your leg now. I'll be gentle. It took nearly 30 minutes of patient coaxing, retreating whenever Spirit showed signs of panic, advancing only when the colt seemed ready. Finally, Jaden managed to loosely wrap the worst of the wounds on the hind leg. The greater challenge was getting Spirit into the truck. Jaden found discarded boards near a construction site a quarter-mile down the road and fashioned a crude ramp to the bed of his pickup. Through a combination of patience, gentle urging, and sheer necessity, he eventually guided the reluctant, trembling colt up and into the truck. Jaden couldn't take Spirit to his trailer. It would be the first place Montgomery's people would look if they were searching for the escaped Mustang. Instead, he drove carefully along back roads until he reached the outskirts of Sedona, where red rock formations rose like sentinels against the night sky. Hidden among these formations was a small canyon his grandmother had shown him years ago, a place where Navajo elders sometimes held private ceremonies. There, a shallow cave provided shelter, and a freshwater spring ensured that basic needs could be met. By the time Jaden had settled Spirit in the cave with fresh water and the few apples he'd had in his truck, dawn was breaking over the canyon rim. He needed to get to work in a few hours, but couldn't bring himself to leave the traumatized colt just yet. Sitting at the cave entrance, watching as the first golden light touched the red rocks, Jaden made a silent promise to the Mustang now resting uneasily behind him. They tried to break you, but they failed, he whispered. And as long as I'm breathing, they won't get another chance. The Silverado ranch was buzzing with unusual activity when Jaden arrived for his shift. Ranch hands clustered around Ray Jenkins, who was gesturing emphatically. Montgomery is offering $5,000 to anyone who finds a golden Mustang that escaped during transport yesterday, Jenkins announced to the gathered employees. They say it's worth more than 20 grand at auction. One of the trucks had an accident on Route 66 last night. When Jenkins spotted Jaden, his gaze hardened. I hope you don't have anything to do with this, kid. That's the kind of trouble we don't need. Billy Harrison laughed maliciously, as if the crazy Indian could tame that demon. They say it's already attacked 3 professional handlers. It's more suited for the slaughterhouse than showing. Jaden lowered his head and walked toward the stables, his face carefully blank. Throughout the day, he worked mechanically, his mind on the injured colt hidden in the canyon. At the end of his shift, while everyone headed to the local bar, he discreetly filled a bag with veterinary medications and bandages from the supply room. At the canyon, he found Spirit lying down, feverish. The wounds were inflamed, angry red lines against the golden coat. Jaden sat at a safe distance and once again began his Navajo chant. This time, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch that had belonged to his grandmother. From inside, he extracted traditional medicinal herbs she had taught him to recognize. Slowly, he began to prepare a paste with the herbs and fresh water from the spring. The aroma filled the small space. Spirit watched every movement attentively, but made no attempt to flee. "This will help with the pain," Jaden explained, as if the animal could comprehend every word. "My grandmother said horses understand our intention, not our words." With calculated movements, he inched closer. When Spirit snorted nervously, Jaden immediately stopped. They remained this way for hours, in a silent game of patience and respect. When the moon was high in the sky, Spirit finally lowered his head slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture of surrender. Jaden extended his hand with the medicinal paste, still not touching the animal. Against all expectations, Spirit stretched out his muzzle and, for a brief moment, touched the young Navajo's open palm. It was the first voluntary contact he had allowed since being captured from the wild plains, a small spark of trust that nobody would have believed possible. Spirit stretched out his muzzle and, for a brief moment, touched the young Navajo's open palm. It was the first voluntary contact he had allowed since being captured from the wild plains, a small spark of trust that nobody would have believed possible. Jaden remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. The touch was feather-light, gone almost as soon as it happened, but its significance hung in the air between them. In that fleeting connection, something fundamental had shifted. "Thank you," Jaden whispered, slowly withdrawing his hand without making any sudden movements. Outside the cave, the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky. Jaden had been with Spirit all night, and now faced the grueling prospect of a full day's work without sleep. He couldn't risk losing his job at the ranch. It was his only steady income, meager as it was. "I have to go now," he explained to the Mustang, who watched him with wary eyes, fever still evident in his trembling flanks. "But I'll be back before sunset. I promise." As Jaden gathered his few belongings, he laid out fresh water in a shallow depression in the cave floor and placed the remaining herbs nearby. Before leaving, he studied the Mustang's wounds in the growing light. The inflammation was severe, but at least the bleeding had stopped. With proper care, the physical injuries would heal. The wounds to Spirit's trust would take far longer. 4 hours later, Jaden's eyes burned with fatigue as he forked hay into the stalls at Silverado Ranch. He had stopped at his trailer only long enough to change clothes, his mind constantly returning to the injured Mustang hidden in the canyon. "You look like hell warmed over," Billy Harrison commented, leaning against a stall door. His eyes narrowed as he studied Jaden's face. "What have you been up to anyway? Nobody's seen you around the trailer park after hours." Jaden continued working, his movement steady despite his exhaustion. "Just picking up extra work. Bills don't pay themselves." Billy's gaze dropped to Jaden's hands, where faint green stains from the medicinal herbs still colored his fingernails despite scrubbing. "What's that stuff on your hands? Looks like you've been playing with plants or something." Jaden casually wiped his hands on his jeans. "Just some traditional remedies. Got a cold coming on." Before Billy could press further, Ray Jenkins appeared at the barn entrance. "Harrison, stop jawing and start earning your pay. Those paddocks need mucking." The foreman turned to Jaden. "White Cloud, when you're done here, Dr. Sanchez wants you to work with that bay mare again. She's still not letting anyone near her leg to change the bandages." Jaden nodded, relief washing through him as Billy sauntered away, though the man's suspicious glances lingered in his mind. He would need to be more careful. Throughout the day, Jaden moved through his tasks with mechanical efficiency, his body present while his thoughts remained with Spirit. During his lunch break, he slipped into the supply room and carefully selected additional bandages, antiseptic spray, and a small container of antibiotic ointment, tucking them into his backpack. If anyone noticed, they might assume he was collecting supplies for the bay mare he was working with. As the afternoon wore on, Jenkins gathered the ranch hands for an update. Montgomery's people called again. They've upped the reward to $7,000 for information on that golden Mustang. The foreman's gaze swept across the assembled workers. Keep your eyes open for any strangers with golden horses. That kind of money would be a nice bonus for anyone who spots it. The ranch hands murmured excitedly, but Jaden felt ice form in his stomach. $7,000 was more money than he'd make in half a year. For men like Billy Harrison, it represented an irresistible temptation. "What's so special about this horse anyway?" someone asked. Jenkins shrugged. "Apparently it's got rare bloodlines, some kind of Kiger Mustang with unusual coloring. Montgomery was planning to have it professionally trained for competitions, worth a small fortune with the right handling." "If they can handle it," Billy snorted. "I heard it nearly took a guy's arm off during loading." Jaden kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced. Spirit's aggressive behavior wasn't innate. It was a response to trauma and fear. Under Montgomery's professional training, that fear would only be compounded by force and domination, breaking the Mustang's spirit to achieve obedience. As the meeting dispersed, Jaden noticed Billy watching him with renewed interest. He would need to be extremely cautious. By the time Jaden reached the canyon that evening, darkness had already fallen. The temperature dropped rapidly in the desert night, and he hurried to the cave, concern growing when he didn't immediately see Spirit. "Hey," he called softly, stepping into the shadows. "It's me." A soft nickering from the back of the cave answered him. Spirit had retreated to the farthest corner, still lying down but alert, ears pricked forward at the sound of Jaden's voice. Jaden knelt at a respectful distance, unpacking his stolen medical supplies by the light of a small battery-powered lantern. Spirit's eyes reflected the light, watching every movement. "The wounds need cleaning," Jaden explained, preparing a mixture of antiseptic and water. "It's going to sting, but it will help fight the infection." When he attempted to approach with the medicine, Spirit's reaction was immediate and violent. The Mustang lunged upward despite his weakness, teeth bared, a shrill whinny of fear and threat echoing off the cave walls. Jaden backed away instantly, heart pounding. He could force the issue, pin the weakened horse down somehow, apply the medicine against his will, but that would destroy the fragile trust beginning to form between them. Instead, he retreated to the cave entrance and sat cross-legged on the ground. From his pocket, he withdrew the cedar flute his grandmother had carved. The instrument was small, fitting easily in his palm, its surface worn smooth by years of handling. "My grandmother taught me that music speaks when words fail," he said quietly. "Maybe this will make more sense to you than my explanations." He raised the flute to his lips and began to play. The melody was simple at first, a low, gentle sequence of notes that floated on the night air. Jaden closed his eyes, letting the music carry his intentions: peace, safety, healing. For nearly an hour he played without pause, the melodies shifting like water flowing over stones, sometimes quickening, sometimes slowing to almost stillness. When he finally lowered the flute, the cave had fallen into a profound silence. Spirit's posture had changed. The Mustang still lay in the back of the cave, but his head was raised, ears forward, breathing steady. The panic had subsided, replaced by something like curiosity. "Better?" Jaden asked softly. He didn't approach again that night, respecting the boundary Spirit had established. Instead, he prepared a fresh poultice of herbs and left it within the Mustang's reach, along with fresh water and the few carrots he'd managed to bring from the ranch. As the night deepened, Jaden unrolled a thin blanket near the cave entrance. He couldn't risk returning to his trailer tonight. Billy's suspicions were too keen and the reward too tempting. Better to stay with Spirit and return to the ranch before dawn. "Rest," he murmured to the Mustang. "Healing takes time." Jaden fell asleep to the sound of Spirit's breathing, steady now where it had been labored before. In his dreams, he ran across open plains, the wind in his hair, Spirit galloping beside him, both of them free, both of them whole. The pattern established itself over the following days. Jaden would leave the canyon before dawn, work his shift at the ranch, and returned to Spirit in the evenings. Each night, he played the flute, its music becoming a ritual that the Mustang seemed to anticipate. After the third night, Spirit no longer showed aggression when Jayden approached with medicine, though he remained watchful, muscles tensed to flee if necessary. Respect for respect, Jayden murmured daily, like a mantra. I never ask for what isn't freely offered. This phrase, one of his grandmother's teachings, guided every interaction. Unlike conventional training methods that demanded submission, Jayden's approach honored Spirit's autonomy. He made no attempt to halter the Mustang or restrict his movement within the cave. When Spirit showed discomfort, Jayden immediately backed away. On the fifth day, Jayden brought an apple from the ranch kitchen, cutting it into small pieces. Instead of offering it directly, he placed the pieces in a trail leading from Spirit's usual resting place toward where he himself sat. It was a risk. The Mustang might simply eat the closest pieces and ignore the rest. But Jayden was patient. To his quiet delight, Spirit followed the trail of apple pieces, consuming each one until he stood closer to Jayden than ever before, less than an arm's length away. You decide each step, Jayden said softly. Always you who decides. That evening, as twilight painted the canyon walls in shades of purple and gold, Jayden spoke to Spirit as he might to a friend, sharing the weight of his own story. My father died when I was 12, he said quietly, arranging fresh bandages for Spirit's improving wounds. Hit by a truck on his way home from the power plant. My mother, she couldn't handle it. Started with drinking, then pills. One day she just didn't come home. Spirit's ears flicked toward Jayden's voice, his eyes reflecting the last light of day. Grandmother raised me after that. Taught me the old ways, the songs, the stories. She said some people are born with gifts. Mine was understanding horses. He smiled faintly. At school they called me crazy for it, the Indian who talks to horses. The Mustang lowered his head slightly, nostrils flaring as he scented the air near Jayden. I guess what I'm saying is, I know something about being left behind, about having to find your own way when the world seems determined to break you. In that moment of quiet connection, Jayden slowly raised his hand, palm up, offering but not insisting. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, with delicate precision, Spirit extended his muzzle and touched Jayden's fingers, allowing the young man to gently stroke the soft skin of his nose. It was a breakthrough that brought tears to Jayden's eyes, not just physical contact, but contact offered freely, without fear or coercion. The next morning, as Jayden prepared to leave for work, Billy Harrison's truck appeared on the road below the canyon, moving slowly as if searching for something. Jayden froze, ducking behind a boulder until the vehicle passed. That day at the ranch, Billy's scrutiny intensified. You sleeping rough, White Cloud? He asked as they crossed paths in the tack room. Your truck wasn't at the trailer park last night. Jayden kept his expression neutral. Stayed with a friend. Didn't know you had friends, Billy snorted. Besides horses, anyway. After his shift ended, Jayden took a circuitous route back to the canyon, constantly checking his rearview mirror for signs of being followed. When he finally reached the cave, Spirit greeted him with a soft nickering that sounded almost like welcome. The Mustang's fever had broken, and though the wounds were still healing, the inflammation had subsided significantly. For the first time, Spirit allowed Jayden to examine his injured leg closely, standing still as gentle fingers probed the healing tissue. You're getting better, Jayden murmured approvingly. Stronger every day. That night, a thunderstorm rolled across the desert. The first crash of thunder sent Spirit into a panic, his eyes wild with fear as lightning illuminated the cave in harsh white flashes. Jayden moved immediately to the Mustang's side, singing softly in Navajo, the same songs his grandmother had used to calm him during childhood storms. Gradually, Spirit's terror subsided. By the storm's end, the Mustang stood close beside Jayden, their breathing synchronized, fear replaced by mutual comfort. The following evening, as Jayden gathered his belongings to leave, he turned back for a final glance at Spirit. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. The Mustang was standing at the cave entrance, watching Jaden's departure with an alertness that hadn't been there before. Spirit took a hesitant step forward, then another, moving to the very edge of the cave opening. He stood framed against the twilight sky, head high, ears pricked forward. No longer a wounded fugitive hiding in shadows, but a being with renewed interest in the world beyond, as if wanting to follow. For a moment, Jaden couldn't move, transfixed by the sight that contradicted everything Montgomery's experts had claimed was impossible for this untamable demon, a wild Mustang showing not just tolerance of human presence, but a desire for connection that transcended fear. For a moment, Jaden couldn't move, transfixed by the sight that contradicted everything Montgomery's experts had claimed was impossible for this untamable demon, a wild Mustang showing not just tolerance of human presence, but a desire for connection that transcended fear. The realization sent a wave of both elation and concern through Jaden. Spirit's increasing trust was a miracle unfolding before his eyes, but it also meant the Mustang was growing stronger. Soon, keeping him hidden in this cave would become impossible. The golden coat, once dulled by injury and fear, had begun to regain its luster, a beacon that would instantly identify him to anyone hunting Montgomery's prized possession. As if reading his thoughts, Spirit took another hesitant step forward, hooves crunching softly on the loose stones at the cave entrance. The setting sun caught his coat, transforming it to molten gold. Anyone passing through the canyon would spot him immediately. "Not yet," Jaden said gently, moving slowly back toward the cave. "You're not strong enough, and it's not safe." The Mustang's ears flicked forward, catching the cadence of Jaden's voice. After a moment's consideration, he retreated into the shadows of the cave, but his gaze remained fixed on the world outside, a world he clearly longed to rejoin. The following morning, Jaden arrived at Silverado Ranch to find an unfamiliar black Cadillac Escalade parked outside the main office. Through the window, he glimpsed Ray Jenkins gesturing animatedly to a tall, impeccably dressed man whose very posture exuded authority. Even from a distance, Jaden recognized Charles Montgomery. His face had appeared in enough local newspapers announcing land acquisitions and development projects. Keeping his head down, Jaden slipped into the barn and began his morning chores, straining to catch snippets of conversation as Montgomery and Jenkins emerged from the office. "Finest Kiger Mustang bloodline I've tracked in years," Montgomery was saying, his Texas drawl coating each word like honey over steel. "That golden coat appears in less than 1% of the population. With proper training, he'll dominate the national exhibition circuit." Jenkins nodded deferentially. "We've alerted all the hands to keep an eye out. The reward is motivating for sure." Montgomery removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes cold as winter sky. "I've hired professional trackers to supplement the search. They'll start working the canyons tomorrow. That horse represents a significant investment, Jenkins, and nobody steals from Charles Montgomery." The threat in those final words sent a chill through Jaden. Montgomery wasn't just looking for valuable property. This was personal now, a matter of pride. As the two men walked toward the training arena, Jaden slipped further into the shadows of the barn, his mind racing. He needed help, professional help, if Spirit was going to survive his wounds fully. That afternoon during his lunch break, Jaden drove to Flagstaff's only veterinary supply store. His knowledge of herbs and traditional medicine had helped stabilize Spirit, but the deepest wound on the Mustang's hind leg needed proper antibiotics to prevent a potentially fatal infection. The small bell above the door jingled as Jaden entered Williams Veterinary Supply. The store smelled of antiseptic and leather, shelves stocked with medications, bandages, and specialized equipment. He moved purposefully toward the antiseptic section, carefully selecting items he could afford with his meager savings. As he examined a bottle of wound cleanser, a voice behind him asked, "Large animal or small?" Jaden turned to find a woman in her early 40s watching him with professional interest. Her name tag identified her as Dr. Sarah Williams, and something in her direct gaze told Jaden she wasn't merely making conversation. "Horse?" he answered cautiously. She nodded, eyes dropping to the supplies in his hands. "Wound treatment, infection control. These are good choices, but depending on the severity, you might need something stronger. She reached past him, selecting a different antiseptic. This one's better for deep tissue wounds, less scarring. Jaden hesitated, checking the price tag, nearly twice what he'd budgeted. Dr. Williams studied him thoughtfully. Most ranch owners have accounts here, or send their regular vets. It's complicated, Jaden replied, avoiding her gaze. After paying for his purchases, Jaden hurried toward his truck, only to find Dr. Williams leaning against it, arms crossed. "Whatever you're hiding, you look like you could use some help," she said bluntly. "I'm a veterinarian, or was, until recently." Jaden shifted uncomfortably. "I appreciate the offer, but—" "Let me guess," she interrupted. "You're treating an animal you don't technically own, and you can't afford proper veterinary care." Her expression softened slightly. "I've seen that look before, usually on people trying to help animals nobody else cares about." Jaden remained silent, weighing his options. Spirit needed professional care, but involving anyone else carried enormous risk. "Montgomery's golden Mustang," Dr. Williams said quietly, watching recognition flash across Jaden's face. "That's what you're hiding, isn't it?" Jaden stiffened, glancing around the parking lot. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah reached into her pocket and withdrew a newspaper clipping. "Charles Montgomery bought the building where my clinic operated for 15 years. Tripled the rent overnight. When I couldn't pay, he had me evicted with 3 days' notice." Her voice remained steady, but anger flashed in her eyes. 32 animals under treatment had to be relocated in a panic. 2 didn't survive the stress. She handed Jaden the clipping, a small article about local business closures, with a photo of Sarah standing outside her shuttered clinic. "Whatever you're doing with that horse," she continued, "I want to help. Not just because it might irritate Montgomery, though I won't pretend that isn't a bonus, but because any animal that escaped his collection deserves a fighting chance." Jaden studied her face, searching for deception. Finding none, he made a decision. "The leg wound is deep," he admitted quietly. "I've been using traditional medicine, but the infection is stubborn." Sarah nodded. "I still have supplies from my clinic in storage. Give me your address and I'll—" "No," Jaden interrupted firmly. "I'll take you there, but you have to come alone, and you can't tell anyone. Ever." As they arranged to meet after Jaden's shift ended, neither noticed Billy Harrison watching from his truck across the parking lot, a calculating expression on his face. That evening, as Jaden drove toward the canyon with Sarah following in her Jeep, he constantly checked his mirrors for signs of pursuit. The roads remained clear, but anxiety knotted his stomach. Introducing a stranger to Spirit risked undoing weeks of careful trust building. Parking at the base of the canyon, Jaden led Sarah up a narrow trail between towering red rock formations. As they rounded the final bend toward the cave, a figure stepped from behind a boulder. An elderly Navajo man with long silver hair tied back in a traditional style, leaning on an intricately carved walking stick. "Frank!" Jaden exclaimed, recognizing his grandmother's old friend. "What are you doing here?" Frank Red Cloud's weathered face creased in a smile. "The better question is what that white man with the fancy boots was doing sniffing around these canyons earlier." Jaden tensed. "What white man?" "Cowboy hat, new truck, looking mighty interested in tire tracks and such." Frank's dark eyes shifted to Sarah. "And now you bring another outsider." "She's a veterinarian," Jaden explained. "Spirit's wounds need professional care." Frank studied Sarah for a long moment before nodding slightly. The spirits speak well of her intentions. But that cowboy, his heart was full of greed. I led him on a fine chase through the South Canyons, telling him tales of ancient curses and restless ghosts. Despite his concern, Jaden smiled. Billy Harrison was notoriously superstitious. "He won't return tonight," Frank continued, "but he'll be back. With others, perhaps." Inside the cave, Spirit greeted Jaden with a soft nickering that shifted to alarm at the sight of strangers. The Mustang retreated to the back wall, nostrils flared, eyes wide with renewed fear. Sarah gasped softly. "He's magnificent." "Stay here," Jaden instructed, moving slowly into the cave alone. For the next 15 minutes, he sat quietly with Spirit, singing softly in Navajo, re-establishing the connection that had been momentarily severed by the presence of strangers. Only when the Mustang's breathing had calmed did Jaden motion for Sarah to enter, instructing her to move slowly and remain at a distance. From several feet away, Sarah conducted her examination, impressed by the healing already evident in most of Spirit's wounds. "The poultices you've used are remarkably effective," she observed. "But that hind leg needs antibiotics. The infection is deep." Working together over the next hour, Jaden used his connection with Spirit to keep the Mustang calm, while Sarah provided guidance on treatment. She demonstrated how to properly clean the wound and apply the antibiotics, always respecting the boundary of direct contact that Spirit had established with her. "I've never seen anything like this," Sarah admitted, watching as Spirit allowed Jaden to treat the infected leg. "Most wild Mustangs take months to accept any human contact, especially after trauma." "Jaden has the old gift," Frank explained from where he sat at the cave entrance. "What you call horse whispering, we have known for generations. It runs in his family." As darkness fell, Frank built a small fire outside the cave. While Spirit rested inside, the three humans shared a simple meal of coffee and sandwiches Sarah had brought. "Montgomery is eliminating Mustang herds from public lands at an alarming rate," Sarah explained. "He calls it population management, but it's thinly veiled profiteering. The Bureau of Land Management grants him permits based on environmental impact studies his own company conducts." Frank nodded grimly. "The same story, different century, taking what is not theirs to take." "My granddaughter Emma is in law school," he continued, turning to Jaden. "She's been researching Montgomery's operations for a project on environmental law. The permissions he's obtained for capturing wild horses are questionable at best, illegal at worst." Sarah studied Spirit's brand through her camera's telephoto lens. "Those markings don't match the standard Montgomery Enterprises brand registered with the state. It's similar, but different." Frank's expression grew grave. "Montgomery isn't just after a valuable horse," he said, eyes fixed on the distinctive marks on Spirit's flank. "He's eliminating witnesses to an illegal capture scheme on protected lands. Those marks on Spirit's flank are the proof that could bring down his empire, and that's why he'll never leave you two in peace." Frank's expression grew grave. "Montgomery isn't just after a valuable horse," he said, eyes fixed on the distinctive marks on Spirit's flank. "He's eliminating witnesses to an illegal capture scheme on protected lands. Those marks on Spirit's flank are the proof that could bring down his empire, and that's why he'll never leave you two in peace." A heavy silence settled over the group. Jaden studied the brand on Spirit's golden coat with new understanding. What he had rescued wasn't just a wounded animal, but evidence of corruption that reached into federal agencies and threatened ancestral lands. "We need to document everything," Emma Red Cloud said the next morning, arriving at the cave with a leather messenger bag slung across her shoulder. Frank's granddaughter moved with the purposeful energy of someone accustomed to fighting impossible battles. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and despite her university sweatshirt, she carried herself with the dignity Frank had clearly passed down. "Those markings are inconsistent with Montgomery's registered brand," she explained, spreading documents on a flat rock. "According to BLM records, his permit only allows capture in specific zones, but these coordinates," she pointed to a map, "show his operations have expanded into protected areas where no Mustangs should be touched." Jaden listened intently, but his attention divided when he noticed Spirit standing alert at the cave entrance, ears pricked toward the sound of Emma's unfamiliar voice. The Mustang's body language had transformed dramatically in the past week. Where once he had cowered in the darkest corner, now he displayed curiosity, though caution still governed his movements. "He's getting restless," Jaden observed quietly. "The cave won't contain him much longer." Sarah nodded, reviewing the photographs she'd taken of Spirit's healing wounds. His physical recovery is remarkable. Another week, maybe 2, and there'll be little evidence he was ever injured. Except for the brand, of course. Frank's weathered hands traced invisible patterns in the air. The land calls to him. Wild things need space to breathe. The conversation halted when a faint mechanical buzzing drifted down from above. Emma was the first to recognize it. "Drone," she whispered urgently, gesturing everyone deeper into the cave. Spirit's reaction was immediate. His entire body tensed, nostrils flaring as his eyes darted upward. The sound clearly triggered memories of his capture. A tremor ran through his powerful frame. "They're searching systematically now," Emma said once the sound had faded. "Montgomery's getting desperate." Back at Silverado Ranch that afternoon, Jaden felt the pressure intensifying. The drone's appearance was no coincidence. Billy Harrison watched him constantly, a calculating gleam in his eyes. During the afternoon feed, he cornered Jaden in the hay storage. "Saw a drone over the canyons today," Billy remarked casually, leaning against a stack of bales. "Montgomery's got his people combing every inch, even hired some Navajo trackers from up north." Jaden focused on measuring grain, his expression neutral. "Good luck to them. Lots of canyons out there." "Funny thing," Billy continued, studying his fingernails. "That drone footage showed something interesting near the old ceremonial caves. Something golden catching the light." Jaden's heart hammered, but he kept his movements steady. "Probably just sandstone. It lights up like fire at certain times of day." Billy stepped closer, voice dropping. $10,000 would change my life, White Cloud. Might even change yours too if you were inclined to share information about, say, a certain horse." "I work with horses all day," Jaden replied evenly. "Wouldn't know anything about a missing Mustang." "Sure," Billy smirked. "And I suppose you haven't been disappearing every night, or bringing veterinary supplies from town, or having secret meetings with that Williams woman whose clinic Montgomery shut down." Ice formed in Jaden's stomach. Billy had been watching more closely than he'd realized. "You've got nothing but suspicions," Jaden said, turning to leave. Billy grabbed his arm. "Not for long. Those trackers start working the northern canyons tomorrow, and I might just join them, unless there's something in it for me to look elsewhere." Jaden pulled free, walking away without another word, his mind racing. They needed to move Spirit immediately. The urgency of the situation became clear that evening when Jaden arrived at the cave to find Sarah, Frank, and Emma in a tense huddle outside. "Trackers were spotted 2 canyons over," Sarah explained without preamble. "Professional ones with thermal imaging equipment. They'll be here by morning." Emma handed Jaden her phone, showing a map with red markers. "My contact at the tribal council says Montgomery's men have established a perimeter. They're working inward systematically." Jaden entered the cave, finding Spirit alert and restless. The Mustang paced the limited space, occasionally pausing to stare longingly at the fading daylight outside. In the weeks since their first encounter, Spirit's physical transformation had been remarkable. His coat gleamed with renewed health, muscles rippling beneath the golden hide. The fearful, wounded creature from the roadside had become a magnificent example of his kind. "We need to move you," Jaden said softly, approaching with the light rope halter he'd fashioned but never used. "Tonight." Spirit's ears flicked forward at Jaden's voice, but his eyes fixed warily on the unfamiliar halter. Jaden made no attempt to apply it, simply holding it where Spirit could investigate. The Mustang stretched his neck, nostrils flaring as he scented the object. "I won't force you," Jaden continued in the same gentle tone. "But we can't stay here." Outside, Emma received an alarming call. "The trackers are changing course," she reported, covering the phone. "They're approaching the canyon from the north side. Someone must have tipped them off." Sarah began hurriedly packing medical supplies. "How long do we have?" "An hour, maybe less." Frank's weathered face set in determined lines. "The Vale of Whispers," he said decisively. "We take him there." "That's 20 miles into the reservation," Emma objected. "How can we transport a half-wild Mustang that far without being seen?" "We don't transport him," Frank replied, eyes meeting Jaden's. "They travel as one." Inside the cave, Jaden sat cross-legged on the ground, the halter beside him. Instead of approaching Spirit directly, he began playing his cedar flute. The familiar melody filled the space, a song about ancestral pathways and safe journeys. He had played this particular tune many times during their evening sessions, and Spirit's response was visible. The Mustang's pacing slowed, his breathing deepened, ears constantly trained on the source of the music. When Jaden finally stopped playing, he spoke quietly, sharing his concerns as he had every day. "They're coming for you," he explained, as if the horse could understand every word. "People who want to own you, control you. We need to find somewhere safer, deeper in the canyonlands." Spirit watched him intently, intelligence evident in his gaze. When Jaden finally stood, halter in hand, the Mustang didn't retreat. Instead, he lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in what appeared to be consideration. "Your choice," Jaden whispered. "Always your choice." For several breathless minutes, nothing happened. Then, with deliberate slowness, Spirit stepped forward and allowed Jaden to slip the light halter over his head. The moment was so profound that Jaden felt tears prick at his eyes. This wasn't surrender, but trust freely given. When they emerged from the cave, Sarah gasped audibly. Spirit stood proudly beside Jaden, the setting sun gilding his coat to a deep bronze. The transformation from terrified, wounded fugitive to magnificent wild creature was complete. "We need to move now," Emma urged, eyes fixed on her phone. "The trackers have changed direction again. They're coming straight for us." Frank performed a brief ceremony, burning sacred herbs and marking Jaden's forehead with a symbol of protection. "The spirits of our ancestors will shield your path," he murmured in Navajo. The plan was precarious. Sarah and Emma would create a diversion several canyons away, while Frank would guide Jaden and Spirit through hidden trails toward the Veil of Whispers, a sacred place known only to tribal elders, protected both by its remote location and by the spiritual significance that kept it off official maps. As darkness fell, they separated. Jaden led Spirit carefully down the narrow trail that wound through the canyon floor. The Mustang moved with surprising confidence, hooves finding secure placement even in near darkness. Frank walked ahead, occasionally pausing to listen for pursuers. Their first major obstacle came when they needed to cross an exposed stretch of desert to reach the next canyon system. Frank pointed to distant headlights moving along the highway. "Montgomery's patrols," he explained grimly. "We must wait until they pass." Hidden among the shadows of a rock formation, they watched the vehicles slowly traverse the road. Spirit grew increasingly restless, sensing the tension. When a helicopter appeared in the distance, searchlight sweeping the terrain, the Mustang trembled visibly. "They're using infrared," Frank whispered. "We cannot cross open ground while they're searching." Jaden stroked Spirit's neck soothingly, feeling the rapid pulse beneath his fingers. The Mustang's fear was palpable. The sound of the helicopter clearly triggered memories of his capture. Yet he remained beside Jaden, fighting his instinct to flee. For nearly an hour they waited in tense silence as vehicles patrolled and the helicopter made periodic passes. Finally, Frank gestured toward a narrow ravine. "Through there. It will shield us from aerial view, but we must move quickly." As they prepared to make their crossing, Spirit suddenly froze, attention fixed on something in the distance. Following his gaze, Jaden spotted a drone hovering near the canyon they had recently abandoned. They found the cave, he realized aloud. The drone lingered for a moment too long before darting away toward Montgomery's camp. The feeling of being watched hung in the air like a silent threat. "We must go," Frank urged. Now, leading Spirit through the ravine required complete trust on both their parts. The path was barely wide enough for the Mustang to pass, with sharp drops on one side. Several times loose stones clattered down the slope, causing Spirit to balk in fear. Each time, Jaden waited patiently, speaking in soft tones until the Mustang found his courage again. By midnight, they reached the boundary of the Navajo reservation, marked only by an ancient juniper tree that Frank identified as a traditional landmark. Here, tribal jurisdiction began, offering some legal protection, though Jaden knew Montgomery's influence extended even here. We rest briefly, Frank decided, indicating a sheltered hollow. Dawn comes early, and we must reach the Vale before first light. As they settled into the hollow, Spirit remained standing, alert to every sound in the desert night. The Mustang's vigilance was both comforting and concerning. He sensed dangers humans might miss, but his nervousness also reflected the trauma still evident beneath his physical recovery. Jaden sat beside him, not touching, simply offering his presence. After several minutes, Spirit lowered his head until it rested lightly against Jaden's shoulder, a gesture of such trust and intimacy that Frank, watching from a few feet away, nodded in silent acknowledgement of something profound passing between human and horse. The Old Ones spoke of such partnerships, the elder murmured. Not domination, but conversation between spirits. While they rested, Emma texted updates. Montgomery's men had found the cave and were in a frenzy, doubling the reward and expanding the search perimeter. More worryingly, they had somehow obtained permission for limited operations on reservation land, claiming stolen property recovery rights. "We move again in 1 hour," Frank said after reading the message. "The Vale is still safe. Its location is known only to elders, and it does not appear on any government maps." As Jaden prepared for the final leg of their journey, he realized with sudden clarity how completely his life had changed in the weeks since finding Spirit on that rain-soaked roadside. What had begun as simple compassion had become a mission that now involved an expanding circle of allies against a powerful enemy, all for a horse that society viewed as mere property, but who Jaden had come to recognize as a being with his own dignity and worth. While they waited, Jaden dozed lightly, only to be awakened by Spirit's soft nickering. Opening his eyes, he found the Mustang staring intently into the darkness. A moment later, a drone passed perilously low over their hiding place, hovering for a moment too long before darting away quickly in the direction of Montgomery's camp. The sensation of being observed lingered in the air like a silent threat. A drone passed perilously low over their hiding place, hovering for a moment too long before darting away quickly in the direction of Montgomery's camp. The sensation of being observed lingered in the air like a silent threat. "They know we're in this area," Emma whispered, her eyes tracking the drone until it disappeared into the night sky. "Those thermal sensors can detect body heat even through brush cover." Jaden felt Spirit trembling beside him, the Mustang's muscles taut with renewed anxiety. The mechanical whirring had triggered something primal in the animal, a memory of his capture, perhaps, when similar devices had likely been used to track his herd before the roundup. "We need those photographs of the brand," Emma continued, her voice low but urgent. "Clear, detailed images that show the inconsistencies with Montgomery's registered mark. Without that evidence, we have nothing but accusations." Sarah nodded, adjusting her camera settings. "The problem is getting close enough. Even with a telephoto lens, I need steady, clear shots in good light." Frank studied the stars, calculating the hours until dawn. "First light comes in 3 hours. The Vale of Whispers lies beyond that ridge. If we reach it before sunrise, the morning light will provide what you need." Jaden understood the dilemma immediately. To document the brand properly would require more than the casual contact Spirit had allowed thus far. It would demand sustained, deliberate touching, the kind the Mustang had permitted only in brief moments of extraordinary trust. "We'd need him to stand calmly," Sarah explained, "with his flank fully exposed, and someone would need to clean the area around the brand so the markings are clear." The group turned to Jaden, unspoken questions in their eyes. Could he deepen the connection quickly enough? Would Spirit allow this new level of handling when danger pressed so close around them? "I won't rush him," Jaden said firmly, meeting their gazes. "Respect for respect, always." Inside the small hollow where they had taken shelter, Jaden sat cross-legged on the ground, several feet from where Spirit stood watchful at the entrance. The Mustang's ears flicked back and forth, catching every whisper of sound in the desert night. His golden coat appeared silvery in the moonlight, muscles rippling beneath the skin with each anxious shift of weight. "We're going to try something different," Jaden began softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "But only if you're willing." From his pocket he withdrew the cedar flute. Its familiar shape seemed to register with Spirit, whose ears immediately pivoted forward, recognition evident in his posture. The Mustang had come to associate the instrument with safety, with moments of calm amid chaos. Jaden played a gentle melody, one he had used often during their evenings in the cave. The notes floated on the night air, creating a bubble of peace around them. As always, the music worked its subtle magic. Spirit's breathing slowed perceptibly, his lower lip softening from its tense position. When the final notes faded, Jaden set the flute aside and simply sat in silence. This was another technique he had developed: complete stillness, offering his presence without demand. Minutes stretched into a half hour as he regulated his own breathing, allowing Spirit to observe him in this state of perfect calm. "My father taught me to ride when I was 5, Jaden finally said, his voice quiet but clear in the night stillness. Not with saddles or bits or spurs, but the old way, bareback, with just my hands in the mane and my heart connected to the horses." Spirit's attention remained fixed on him, the Mustang's intelligent eyes reflecting moonlight. "The day he died," Jaden continued, emotion thickening his voice, "I was waiting at the edge of the road. I saw the truck coming too fast, saw my father walking home from work." He paused, the memory still raw despite the years. "I couldn't move, couldn't call out, just froze, watching it happen." Tears slid silently down Jaden's cheeks, the confession of his deepest trauma offered without reservation. "Sometimes I still hear the sound, metal on bone. Sometimes I still freeze, just like that day." The vulnerability in this sharing created something new between them, a bridge of shared pain. Spirit had known violence at human hands, had experienced the helplessness of being overpowered. In revealing his own broken places, Jaden offered something deeper than food or medicine or gentle handling. He offered understanding. "I think you know about being broken," he whispered, "about carrying scars nobody can see." To everyone's amazement, Spirit moved forward deliberately, crossing the space between them to stand directly before Jaden. The Mustang lowered his head, nostrils flaring as he took in the young man's scent. Then, with exquisite gentleness, he touched his muzzle to Jaden's tear-streaked face. The gesture was so unexpected, so profound in its tenderness, that Jaden remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. This wasn't just acceptance of human touch. This was Spirit initiating contact, offering comfort. "My God," Sarah whispered from where she watched at the hollow's edge. "I've never seen anything like this." Frank nodded, unsurprised. The horse recognizes another wounded spirit. They speak the same language. Slowly, with movements telegraphed clearly to avoid startling Spirit, Jaden raised his hand and placed it against the Mustang's neck. The touch was accepted without tension. Gradually, he extended the contact, running his palm along the golden coat, over the shoulder, and finally to the flank where the brand marked Spirit's skin. The Mustang flinched slightly at this new touch, but didn't pull away. Jaden began speaking in Navajo, the ancient words carrying the cadence of a prayer or blessing. Spirit's ear swiveled to catch the sounds, his body relaxing incrementally as the words continued. "Tell Sarah to get ready," Jaden said quietly without looking away from Spirit. "I think he's ready." Working with exquisite care, Sarah approached from behind Jaden, her camera ready but movements deliberately slow. Spirit watched her warily, but remained standing beside Jaden, accepting his continued touch. Using a small cloth dampened with clean water, Jaden gently cleaned the area around the brand, revealing the distinct markings that differed subtly but significantly from Montgomery's registered brand. Sarah photographed from multiple angles, documenting each detail of the unauthorized mark. "This isn't just different from his registered brand," she observed quietly. "These additional markings indicate it was done on federal land outside his permitted range." It's like a location code embedded in the brand itself. Emma examined the photos on Sarah's camera display. This could be enough. If we can prove these horses were taken illegally from protected areas. A sudden sound outside their shelter caused Spirit to tense immediately. Jaden maintained contact, his hand steady against the Mustang's side, whispering reassurances. The moment of crisis passed without the Mustang bolting, another small victory in their growing trust. "Dawn's approaching," Frank warned. "We should move now, while darkness still provides some cover." As they prepared to continue their journey, Jaden made no attempt to lead Spirit with the halter. Instead, he simply began walking, trusting the Mustang to follow of his own accord. After a moment's consideration, Spirit did exactly that, falling into step beside the young Navajo as naturally as if they had traveled together for years. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten when they reached the ridge overlooking the Vale of Whispers. Below them stretched a hidden valley, invisible from most approaches, surrounded by towering rock formations that sheltered it from both elements and observation. A small stream wound through its center, and patches of lush grass, a rarity in the desert landscape, offered grazing that would appeal to Spirit. "Few outsiders have ever seen this place," Frank explained. "Our people have used it as sanctuary for centuries." As they descended into the valley, the first rays of sunlight spilled over the eastern rim, illuminating Spirit's coat to a brilliant gold. The transformation from wounded fugitive to magnificent wild creature was complete. Here, with space to move freely yet protection from those who would exploit him, the Mustang might finally begin to heal the deeper wounds of trauma and captivity. In the growing light, Sarah completed her documentation, capturing clear images of the brand and Spirit's distinctive coloring. The evidence was secured, proof of Montgomery's illegal operations that could potentially end his Mustang roundups permanently. "What happens now?" Jaden asked as they settled in a small camp at the valley's edge. "Even with these photos, Montgomery has power, connections." Emma's expression was determined. "We build a case. These photos, combined with the documents I've collected showing permit discrepancies, create a pattern of illegal activity. But we need more." "More what?" Sarah asked. "More evidence of similar brands on other horses, more documentation of roundups in protected areas, and most importantly, more time." Emma glanced at Spirit, who had moved a short distance away to graze but remained watchful of their group. "Montgomery won't give up easily, not when millions are at stake in his development plans." As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the valley. Spirit's head shot up, ears pricked forward in alarm. "They're expanding the search perimeter," Emma said, checking her phone. "My contact at the tribal office says Montgomery is claiming the horse was stolen from his transport truck. He's pressuring the tribal council for full access to reservation lands." Frank's expression darkened. Some council members might agree, especially with the development money he's dangling before them. Jaden moved immediately to Spirit's side, his presence calming the Mustang's growing anxiety. The bond between them had deepened significantly through the night's experiences, but Jaden knew that Spirit's trauma ran deep. The sound of helicopters would always trigger fear responses, memories of capture that couldn't be erased. "We need those additional photos," Emma insisted, watching the sky nervously. "Clear documentation of the brand that Sarah can share with my legal contacts. Without that evidence properly recorded, it's just our word against Montgomery's." As the helicopter sounds grew louder, approaching the outer boundaries of the reservation, the group watched Jaden and Spirit with growing concern. Everything now depended on the Mustang remaining calm enough for proper documentation, evidence that could potentially save not just Spirit, but countless other wild horses from Montgomery's operations. In this moment of crisis, with danger closing in from all sides, Jaden faced his greatest challenge yet. He needed to ask Spirit for more trust than had yet been established, to remain calm under circumstances specifically designed to trigger his deepest fears. Looking into the Mustang's intelligent eyes, Jaden made his request without words, simply offering his open hand, a question rather than a demand. As the helicopter crested the distant ridge, Spirit trembled visibly, but against all expectations, stepped forward to press his muzzle into Jaden's outstretched palm. It was the first time he had initiated contact so deliberately, a small gesture that spoke volumes about the trust that had formed between them. While examining the photos on her camera's display, Emma received an alarming message on her phone. "Montgomery is coming personally tomorrow. He's brought an animal containment team and federal authorizations that override any reservation protections." Montgomery is coming personally tomorrow. He's brought an animal containment team and federal authorizations that override any reservation protections. The words hung in the air like a physical threat. Jaden instinctively moved closer to Spirit, who sensed the tension and shifted nervously, his golden coat catching the last rays of sunset as darkness began to claim the Veil of Whispers. "We need to move him deeper into Navajo territory," Frank said, his weathered face solemn in the fading light. "The Veil has protected our people for generations, but Montgomery's federal papers could nullify even this sanctuary." Emma studied the satellite map on her phone, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. "The problem is getting there. We'd have to cross nearly 10 miles of exposed terrain, including the main highway where Montgomery's patrols are concentrated." Sarah packed her camera equipment with practiced efficiency. "Those photos are solid evidence, but they're worthless if Montgomery captures Spirit before we can build our case." The gravity of their situation settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Montgomery wasn't just coming for a valuable horse. He was coming to eliminate evidence of his illegal operations. The personal nature of his involvement meant he would spare no expense, use every connection at his disposal. In the deepening twilight, Frank led them to a small ancient structure nestled against the cliff face, a stone shelter used by generations of Navajo for ceremonies and refuge. Inside, he built a small fire, the flames casting dancing shadows across walls etched with petroglyphs of horses and hunters from centuries past. "We cannot outrun Montgomery's technology," Frank said, adding dried sage to the fire. The aromatic smoke filled the shelter. "But there are older paths, known only to the people, that his machines cannot find." As the elders discussed possible routes, Jaden sat apart with Spirit just outside the shelter's entrance. The Mustang remained unusually close, his shoulder occasionally brushing against Jaden's as if seeking reassurance. The helicopter sounds had faded for now, but their effect lingered in Spirit's watchful posture, his ears constantly swiveling to catch every distant sound. "We've come so far," Jaden murmured, not touching the Mustang but offering his presence. "I won't let them take you back." Spirit lowered his muzzle to Jaden's shoulder, his warm breath ghosting across the young man's neck. This voluntary closeness, unimaginable weeks ago, now felt as natural as breathing. In the subtle language they had developed, Jaden read not just trust but partnership, a mutual recognition of their shared journey. Frank emerged from the shelter, carrying his ceremonial pouch. "It is decided. We leave at midnight for the heart of the people. What your maps call Black Mesa. There is a valley there, sacred and hidden, where Montgomery's authority means nothing." "That's 20 miles from here," Emma objected. "How can we possibly travel that far with a semi-wild horse without being detected?" Frank's eyes gleamed in the starlight. "Not as separate travelers, as one." Jaden understood immediately. His heart raced at the implication. Until now, his physical contact with Spirit had been limited to touching, stroking, occasionally leading with the lightest of halters. What Frank suggested was something far more profound, riding Spirit, not as master and servant, but as partners in flight. "I've never asked that of him," Jaden said quietly. "He might not be ready." "He may have no choice," Sarah replied gently. "None of us do." Inside the stone shelter, Frank conducted a ceremony that bridged ancient tradition with present necessity. He painted protective symbols on Jaden's forehead with red ochre, then burned sacred herbs, wafting the smoke around both young man and Mustang, while speaking words in Navajo that were too old for even Jaden to fully comprehend. "Our ancestors rode without metal or leather," Frank explained, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "They communicated through heart and intention. The Mustang remembers this in his blood, even if his mind has forgotten. While Emma and Sarah prepared diversionary tactics, plans to create false sightings miles from their actual route, Jaden spent the remaining hours in quiet communion with Spirit. No music, no words, just shared breath and presence as the stars wheeled overhead in the vast Arizona sky. At midnight, when the moon had set and darkness was complete, they prepared to move. Frank would lead them through hidden canyons and dry washes that didn't appear on any modern map. Emma would monitor Montgomery's movements through her network of contacts. Sarah would follow at a distance with supplies, ready to provide support if needed. The most critical part of their journey would come when they needed to cross the main highway that bisected the reservation, a stretch of road regularly patrolled by Montgomery's vehicles and local police he had likely influenced with generous donations. As the moment of departure approached, Jaden faced Spirit in the starlight. The Mustang watched him with alert intelligence, sensing the gravity of what was to come. "I need to ask something I've never asked before," Jaden said softly, holding the Mustang's gaze. He carried no saddle, no bridle, only a light rope halter and the cedar flute tucked into his jacket. "I need your complete trust." With slow, deliberate movements, Jaden positioned himself beside Spirit, resting one hand lightly on the golden back. The Mustang tensed but didn't move away. For several long minutes, they remained in this tableau, Jaden's hand resting on Spirit's back, neither advancing nor retreating, a question posed in touch rather than words. Then, with a gentleness that brought tears to Sarah's eyes as she watched, Jaden slowly raised himself and settled across Spirit's back. The Mustang's muscles quivered beneath him but held steady. No bucking, no bolting, just a momentary stillness as two breathing rhythms synchronized in the desert night. "Remarkable," Sarah whispered to Emma. "Wild Mustangs typically fight for weeks before accepting a rider, even after extensive training." Frank nodded, unsurprised. "This is not training. This is recognition between spirits." Their journey began in silence, moving like shadows through the landscape. Frank led the way, his knowledge of the land allowing him to find paths invisible to untrained eyes. Spirit moved with surprising confidence, his natural sure-footedness navigating terrain that would challenge even experienced trail horses. Jaden rode without directing, his body relaxing into Spirit's movements, trusting the Mustang's instincts. This was nothing like conventional riding. There was no control, no dominance, only partnership, a shared purpose expressed through subtle weight shifts and unspoken communication. For the first hour, they traveled through protected canyons where rock formations shielded them from aerial observation. Spirit moved with increasing confidence, his initial tension gradually easing as he adjusted to Jaden's weight. The bond between them, forged through weeks of patient trust-building, transformed into something new, a physical harmony that spoke of ancient connections between humans and horses. The first real test came when they needed to cross a small clearing between canyon systems. Frank held up his hand, signaling a halt as they reached the edge of protective shadows. "Drone patrol," he whispered, pointing to a faint blinking light moving systematically across the night sky. They waited in tense silence as the drone completed its sweep, Spirit standing perfectly still despite the clear threat overhead. Only the slight trembling of his muscles betrayed his fear. Jaden leaned forward, his chest against the Mustang's neck, murmuring reassurances too quiet for the others to hear. When the drone finally moved beyond their position, Frank led them quickly across the exposed ground. Spirit followed without hesitation, his trust in Jaden overriding his instinctual fear of open spaces. The night deepened around them as they traveled further into reservation territory. Twice they changed direction to avoid tribal police vehicles, which Frank suspected had been enlisted in Montgomery's search. Each time, Spirit responded instantly to the lightest pressure of Jaden's knees, turning without hesitation. "He moves like he's been carrying you for years," Sarah observed during a brief rest period. "It's as if he can read your thoughts." Jaden smiled faintly, stroking Spirit's neck. "Not my thoughts, my intentions. There's a difference." As they approached the highway crossing, the most dangerous point of their journey, Emma received an alarming update on her phone. Montgomery's convoy was spotted heading toward the tribal headquarters, she reported. 3 black SUVs and a horse trailer. He's making his move earlier than expected. Frank studied the starlit landscape. We must cross now, before they expand their search perimeter. From their vantage point behind a ridge of red rock, they could see headlights moving along the highway. Regular patrols searching for any sign of the Golden Mustang. The crossing point Frank had chosen was a shallow depression where the road cut through low hills, providing some cover from distant observation but leaving them completely exposed during the actual crossing. Sarah and I will create a diversion 2 miles south, Emma said, checking her watch. Wait for my signal, then cross immediately. As the women departed in Sarah's Jeep, Jaden felt Spirit's tension rising. The Mustang could sense the approaching danger, his evolutionary instincts screaming warnings about the open space they would need to traverse. When a vehicle passed particularly close to their hiding place, its headlights briefly illuminating the landscape, Spirit flinched violently, nearly dislodging Jaden from his back. Easy, Jaden whispered, running his hand along the trembling neck. I know you're scared. I am too. For a moment, he thought they had reached the limit of Spirit's trust. The Mustang backed several steps, eyes wide and nostrils flared in the instinctual preparation for flight. This was the reaction Montgomery's handlers had labeled untrainable aggression, the wild instinct that couldn't be broken by conventional methods. Rather than forcing compliance, Jaden slid from Spirit's back and stood beside him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Your choice, he said quietly. Always your choice. Frank watched the exchange with knowing eyes. The crossing will be dangerous either way. Together you move as one and can pass quickly. Separated, the risk increases for both of you. Emma's text arrived moments later. Diversion in place. Highway clear for next 5 minutes. Go now. Jaden faced Spirit, their eyes meeting in the starlight. No commands, no coercion, just a question offered in silence. Would the Mustang trust him enough to override his deepest fears? Time stretched between them, each second carrying them closer to discovery. Then, with deliberate grace, Spirit lowered himself slightly, offering his back in a gesture that needed no translation. Jaden mounted in one fluid motion, and they moved toward the highway, Frank following at a distance. As they emerged from cover, Spirit's pace increased naturally, his powerful body gathering beneath Jaden as instinct and trust merged into unified purpose. They crossed the asphalt in a blur of golden movement, man and horse moving as a single entity, disappearing into the shadows on the far side, just as headlights appeared around the distant curve. Neither Montgomery's vehicles nor technology had detected them, a victory of ancient knowledge over modern surveillance. By dawn, they reached the outer boundaries of what Frank called the heart of the people. Here, Black Mesa rose like a fortress against the horizon, its slopes home to hidden valleys known only to tribal elders. As they crested a final ridge, Jaden felt Spirit's stride change beneath him, a new alertness, an almost palpable recognition of sanctuary. Below them stretched a valley unlike any Jaden had seen before, protected by towering cliffs on 3 sides and a dense forest of juniper and pinyon pine on the 4th. It contained a small lake fed by underground springs, precious water in the desert landscape. Meadows of native grasses rippled in the morning breeze, and in the distance, Jaden spotted movement, a small herd of horses grazing peacefully. The tribal council maintains this herd according to the old ways, Frank explained. No fences, no branding, no forced training. They come and go as they choose, protected by both tradition and geography. As they descended into the valley, several elders emerged from dwellings nestled against the cliff face. They had been expecting arrivals. Frank had somehow sent word ahead, but their reaction to Jaden and Spirit was unexpected. The oldest among them, a man whose face was mapped with the deep lines of nearly a century of life, approached with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. The Rider of Whispers has returned, he said in Navajo, his voice trembling with emotion. The prophecies spoke that in times of great danger for our land, he would return, the one who speaks the forgotten language of horses. The rider of whispers has returned, the elder said in Navajo, his voice trembling with emotion. The prophecies spoke that in times of great danger for our land, he would return, the one who speaks the forgotten language of horses. Jaden shifted uncomfortably atop Spirit, the weight of the elder's words settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. He was no prophesied savior, just a broken boy who'd found a kindred spirit in a wounded Mustang. Yet something in the old man's reverent gaze stopped him from denying the connection outright. Spirit sensed the tension in Jaden's body, his ears flicking back and forth as he processed the unfamiliar surroundings. The Mustang's nostrils flared, drawing in the scents of the valley, water, grass, and most significantly, the other horses grazing in the distance. His entire body vibrated with alertness, caught between wariness and longing. Frank stepped forward, embracing the elder with the familiarity of old friendship. "Hostine Begay, it has been too long," he said, switching to English for the benefit of the others. "We seek sanctuary for this one." He gestured toward Spirit and his friend. Hostine Begay nodded solemnly, his dark eyes never leaving the golden Mustang. "The council fire is already lit. Some have traveled through the night to be here." As dawn fully illuminated the valley, Jaden dismounted, his legs stiff from the long journey. Spirit remained unusually close, his shoulder pressed against Jaden's side as they were led toward a cluster of traditional hogans and modern cabins nestled against the cliff face. The Mustang's eyes darted constantly toward the distant herd, then back to Jaden, as if seeking permission or reassurance. "He wants to join them," Sarah observed quietly, having arrived shortly after with Emma. "But he won't leave you." Jaden nodded, feeling the truth of her words. "He's been alone too long. Horses need community, just like people." Within the largest structure, a circular building that blended traditional design with modern materials, the tribal council had already gathered. 12 men and women of varying ages sat in a semicircle around a central fire, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. The atmosphere was tense, divided. "Montgomery's offer arrived yesterday," a middle-aged councilman explained after introductions had been made. $50 million for economic development, schools, clinics, water infrastructure, in exchange for full cooperation with recovery of stolen property. Emma's expression hardened. "And how many of you are considering it?" An uncomfortable silence followed. Finally, a younger councilwoman spoke. "You cannot blame people for wanting schools that don't leak when it rains, or clinics that have more than one doctor for 5,000 people. Montgomery doesn't build, he destroys," Sarah countered, connecting her camera to a portable projector she'd brought. "Let me show you what he's really after." The images appeared on the blank wall, Spirit's brand in clear detail, followed by documents Emma had compiled showing the discrepancies between Montgomery's official permits and his actual operations. The evidence was compelling, a systematic pattern of illegal captures, falsified environmental reports, and exploitation of tribal lands. "This isn't about one horse," Emma explained. "Spirit is evidence that could bring down Montgomery's entire operation. That's why he's desperate to find him." Outside the council building, Jaden remained with Spirit, allowing the Mustang to graze while keeping a watchful eye on his reactions to the new environment. Despite his obvious interest in the distant herd, Spirit showed no inclination to wander far from Jaden's side, a testament to how deeply their bond had formed. "You should join them," Jaden encouraged softly, gesturing toward the other horses. "It's okay." Spirit raised his head, grass stems dangling from his lips, and gazed toward the herd. A low nickering sound rumbled from his chest, a call that was immediately answered by several horses in the distance. The response seemed to startle him, his muscles tensing as if unsure whether to advance or retreat. Jaden recognized the conflict within the Mustang, the natural pull toward his own kind warring with the fear ingrained by trauma. Rather than forcing a choice, he simply sat on the ground, demonstrating through his relaxed posture that both options were acceptable. Inside the council building, the debate had intensified. News arrived that Montgomery had established a command center at the tribal administrative complex, his influence already evident in the increased police presence throughout the reservation. "He's using the system against us," one elder lamented. "The very tribal police meant to protect our sovereignty are now helping search for the Mustang." Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. "It's going viral," she announced, showing the screen to the group. The short video clips she'd uploaded of Jaden and Spirit, carefully edited to protect their identities and location, had been viewed over 50,000 times in less than 24 hours. "People are outraged about the Mustang roundups," she explained. "The hashtag Dr. Free Spirit is trending nationwide." As the morning progressed, visitors began arriving at the valley, trusted friends and family members of the council, summoned through the private networks that had sustained the Navajo people through generations of external pressure. Each arrival brought news. Montgomery's search parties were expanding their reach, drones were monitoring major roads, and the reward had increased to $10,000. Shortly before noon, a tribal police vehicle appeared at the valley's hidden entrance. The council members tensed, but Frank remained calm. "It is only Joseph," he assured them. "My nephew." The young officer who emerged looked exhausted, his uniform dusty from the drive. "Montgomery is meeting with Chairman Yazzie right now," he reported grimly. "He's offering to double the development package to $100 million if the tribe grants his men unrestricted access to search the entire reservation." A collective murmur passed through the group. Such an amount was unprecedented, enough to transform the economic reality of a community plagued by generational poverty. "And if we refuse?" asked Hostine Begay. Joseph's expression darkened. He mentioned how unfortunate it would be if the BIA reconsidered the water rights settlement currently in negotiation. The threat was clear. Montgomery was leveraging his political connections against the tribe's most vital resource. Outside, Jaden noticed a subtle shift in Spirit's demeanor. The Mustang's head raised sharply, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. Following his gaze, Jaden spotted a figure walking slowly up the path from the valley entrance. A woman in her early 40s, her black hair streaked with premature gray, her movements hesitant yet determined. Jaden froze, his breath catching in his throat. "Mom?" Mariah Whitecloud paused several yards away, her eyes taking in the sight of her son standing beside the golden Mustang. "They said I might find you here," she said quietly. "The rehab center in Phoenix. They showed me the news stories about the Mustang. I knew it had to be you." Spirit sensed Jaden's shock, moving closer to press his muzzle against the young man's shoulder in what had become a gesture of support between them. The Mustang's eyes remained fixed on the newcomer, alert but not alarmed. "You're sober?" Jaden asked, unable to keep the disbelief from his voice. Mariah nodded, her eyes never leaving her son's face. 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. The council meeting adjourned for midday, people emerging from the building to find Jaden and his mother seated on a fallen log, years of absence being bridged through hesitant conversation. Spirit had positioned himself protectively nearby, grazing but constantly monitoring the interaction, his golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. "Your grandmother always said you had the gift," Mariah commented, watching Spirit approach to sniff curiously at her outstretched hand, before retreating to Jaden's side. "I didn't understand what she meant until now." The afternoon brought more arrivals, tribal members who had heard whispers of the Mustang's presence and came to see for themselves. With each new person, Spirit's reactions revealed the depth of his ongoing trauma. Sudden movements caused him to startle violently. Male voices raised in discussion sent him backing away, eyes wide with remembered fear. Yet through it all, he maintained his connection to Jaden, using the young man as an anchor in a world still filled with potential threats. Sarah continued documenting these interactions, capturing the subtle communication between human and horse. "It's not just about one remarkable relationship," she explained to the growing audience for her online updates. "It's about demonstrating an alternative to the brutal breaking methods still common in horse training." By evening, the valley had transformed into an impromptu gathering of supporters. Emma coordinated with legal contacts via satellite phone, building a case against Montgomery's operations. Frank and the other elders conducted a traditional blessing ceremony, creating what they called a spiritual barrier around the valley. Mariah, drawing on her pre-addiction skills as an accountant, reviewed the financial documents Emma had collected. "There's a pattern here," she observed. "Montgomery creates shell companies for each roundup operation, dissolving them immediately after. It's designed to obscure responsibility." As night fell, Jaden found a moment of quiet with Spirit near the small lake. The Mustang had gradually ventured farther from his side during the day, even approaching the resident herd at one point, though he returned quickly when one of the dominant mares pinned her ears at him. "It takes time to find your place," Jaden told him softly. "Trust comes slowly, whether it's with horses or people." Spirit responded by lowering his head to drink from the lake, his reflection merging with Jaden's in the still water. Two broken beings slowly becoming whole through their connection to each other. The peaceful moment was shattered by Emma's urgent approach. "Montgomery's convoy was spotted heading this way," she reported, her voice tight with tension. "Someone must have talked. They'll be at the valley entrance by morning." In the council building, now crowded with tribal members and supporters, the atmosphere crackled with determination. Plans were formulated, roles assigned. Sarah's documentation would be streamed live if confrontation became inevitable. Emma had contacted sympathetic journalists who were already en route. "We have truth on our side," Frank reminded the gathered group. "And sometimes that is enough." As the strategy session continued, a tribal lawyer arrived with unexpected news. Montgomery sent an offer through official channels. He'll pay $1 million for the Mustang. No questions asked, no charges pressed. A stunned silence fell over the gathering. For many in the economically challenged reservation, such an amount was nearly inconceivable, enough to change lives, to provide security that had always remained elusive. All eyes turned to Jaden, who sat quietly stroking Spirit's neck, the Mustang having refused to leave his side as the tension in the room escalated. $1 million, the lawyer repeated. For a horse. Mariah watched her son's face, recognizing the internal struggle. She knew better than most how much security that money could provide. A real home instead of a dilapidated trailer, college education instead of endless minimum wage jobs, freedom from the grinding poverty that had contributed to her own spiral into addiction. While the group finalizes the preparations for the confrontation imminent, a lawyer from Montgomery arrives unexpectedly at the Vale with a surprising proposal. Mr. Montgomery offers $1 million for the horse. No questions, no accusations, money enough to completely change the lives of all of you. Mr. Montgomery offers $1 million for the horse. No questions, no accusations, money enough to completely change the lives of all of you. The attorney's words hung in the air, heavy and seductive. He stood near the entrance of the council building, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed absurdly out of place among the weathered faces and practical clothing of the reservation. His polished leather briefcase rested beside him, a tangible symbol of the wealth and power his words represented. Jaden felt the collective gaze of everyone in the room settle upon him. The $1 million figure echoed in his mind, its magnitude almost incomprehensible. That amount of money would mean a real home instead of the crumbling trailer where he'd shivered through winter nights. It would mean college tuition, medical care for his mother's recovery, and financial security he'd never dared imagine. Montgomery recognizes the attachment that may have formed, the attorney continued smoothly, his manicured hands adjusting his tie. But ultimately, the animal represents a significant investment with documented ownership. My client is being extraordinarily generous given the circumstances. Emma stepped forward, her legal training evident in her composed demeanor. And what exactly are the terms of this offer? Simple, the attorney replied. The Mustang is returned unharmed. Mr. Montgomery signs a non-disclosure agreement regarding how it came into your possession. The funds are transferred immediately to any account you designate. He smiled thinly. Everyone wins. Frank Red Cloud's weathered face revealed nothing as he translated the offer into Navajo for the elders who weren't fluent in English. Murmurs rippled through the gathered council members, some clearly tempted by the unprecedented sum. That kind of money could fund a medical clinic, one councilwoman whispered, with real doctors, not just visiting physicians twice a month. Our school roof has been leaking for 3 years, another added. The children use buckets when it rains. Jaden slipped outside, the weight of the decision pressing on him like a physical burden. In the gathering dusk, Spirit grazed nearby, his golden coat transformed to bronze in the fading light. The Mustang lifted his head at Jaden's approach, ears forward in greeting, eyes reflecting a trust that had been earned through countless hours of patience and respect. The evening air carried the scent of sage and juniper as Jaden sat cross-legged on the ground, Spirit wandering over to stand beside him. Behind them, the heated discussion continued inside the council building, voices occasionally rising before being hushed by the elders' gentle reminders of respect. $1 million, Jaden whispered, reaching up to stroke Spirit's neck. That's what they think you're worth. The Mustang lowered his muzzle to Jaden's shoulder, his breath warm against the young man's skin. This gesture, once unimaginable from the terrified, wounded animal he'd found by the roadside, now came naturally. A communication between beings who had learned to read each other's needs without words. Mariah approached quietly, careful not to startle Spirit. The Mustang had grown accustomed to her presence over the past day, accepting her as an extension of his trust in Jaden. They're waiting for your answer, she said softly, sitting beside her son. The council won't decide without hearing from you first. Jaden nodded, his hand still moving rhythmically along Spirit's golden neck. What would you do? Mariah considered the question carefully. 8 months ago, when I was still using, I would have taken the money without hesitation. She looked up at the magnificent Mustang standing relaxed beside her son. But I've learned something in recovery. Some things can't be measured in dollars. Inside the council building, the debate had intensified. Montgomery's attorney stood impassively near the door, his very presence a reminder of the power and resources aligned against them. Emma and Sarah huddled with their supporters, voices low as they discussed potential counter-strategies. We should consider what this money could mean for the community, argued a younger council member. One horse versus the needs of thousands. Hostine Begay, the eldest member, raised his hand for silence. Before we continue, we must hear from the one whose heart beats with the Mustangs. All eyes turned to Jaden as he re-entered the building, Spirit following voluntarily behind him. The Mustang paused at the threshold, nostrils flaring as he scented the crowded interior. Months ago, such an environment would have sent him into panic. Now, while clearly alert, he maintained his composure, drawing strength from Jaden's calm presence. Montgomery's attorney straightened, surprised by the Mustang's appearance. That's unusual behavior for a wild horse, he observed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his professional mask. He's not wild, Jaden replied quietly, and he's not a possession. He's made choices every step of the way. The room fell silent as Jaden moved to the center of the circle, Spirit following at his shoulder like a golden shadow. The firelight danced across them both, highlighting the parallel scars they carried. Spirit's brand and rope burns, Jaden's leaner wounds of abandonment and loss. I've been thinking about what Spirit means, Jaden began, his voice stronger than anyone expected. Not his monetary value, but his meaning. To me, to the DNA people, to everyone fighting against what Montgomery represents. The Mustang stood perfectly still beside him, his intelligent eyes scanning the room before settling again on Jaden, a focus so intense it seemed to physically connect them. My grandmother taught me that everything has a price, but not everything can be bought, Jaden continued. Spirit isn't mine to sell because he was never mine to own. He chose to trust me. He chooses every day to stay. Montgomery's attorney cleared his throat. This is all very poetic, young man. But sentimentality doesn't change legal ownership. My client is offering a fortune for what is, ultimately, his property. Jaden turned to face him directly. Spirit has no price, he stated firmly, because he isn't my property to sell. He is my friend, my teacher, my brother in spirit. I don't put a price on family. The simplicity and conviction of his words created a palpable shift in the room. Even those who had argued for accepting the offer fell silent, recognizing a truth that transcended financial calculation. The attorney's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Mr. Montgomery will be extremely disappointed with this response. He's not accustomed to being refused. Then perhaps it's time he learned, Emma interjected, stepping forward with renewed confidence. Now, unless you have another offer that doesn't involve treating living beings as commodities, I believe this meeting is concluded. After the attorney's departure, the council remained gathered, the atmosphere transformed by Jaden's decision. What had begun as a debate about money had shifted to a deeper conversation about values and identity. Your refusal of such wealth speaks louder than any testimony, Hostine Begay observed, his ancient eyes bright with approval. The old one said that true wealth comes not from what you possess, but from what possesses your heart. Outside, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Jaden walked with spirit along the edge of the small lake. The Mustang moved with increasing confidence, occasionally wandering several yards away to investigate interesting scents before returning to Jaden's side, the behavior not of a captive animal, but of a free being choosing companionship. Sarah approached with her camera, keeping a respectful distance. "That was incredible," she said quietly. "The way you spoke, the way spirit stood beside you. I've never seen anything like it." Jaden shrugged, embarrassed by the attention. "I just said what felt true." "Sometimes that's the hardest thing," Sarah replied, adjusting her camera settings. "Do you mind if I document a bit more? This relationship you've developed is something the world needs to see." For the next hour, Sarah photographed them together, capturing the subtle communications that had developed between human and horse. There was no posing, no artificial scenarios, just the natural interaction of two beings who had learned to read each other's smallest signals. When Spirit grew tired of the attention, wandering off to graze by the lakeshore, Sarah showed Jaden some of the images on her camera's display. "Look at his expression," she said, pointing to a close-up of Spirit's eye as he gazed at Jaden. "There's recognition there, awareness. This contradicts everything conventional trainers claim about Mustangs." As they reviewed the photographs, Emma joined them, her expression serious. "Montgomery won't take this rejection lightly. My contacts say he's called in additional personnel, professional wranglers with tranquilizer guns, more drones, even helicopters." Jaden nodded, unsurprised. "We always knew it would come to this." "There's something else," Emma added. "My legal colleague just sent over documentation showing Montgomery has obtained a federal court order claiming theft of valuable property across state lines. It potentially overrides tribal jurisdiction." The implications settled heavily between them. Montgomery wasn't just using his money now, he was leveraging the entire legal system against them. Later that night, as most of the valley's occupants slept, Jaden sat with Spirit under the vast canopy of stars. The Mustang rested beside him, head lowered in comfortable relaxation, occasionally nudging Jaden's shoulder as if checking his presence. "Tomorrow will be difficult," Jaden murmured, more to himself than to Spirit. "Montgomery will come with everything he has." As if understanding, Spirit raised his head, ears pricked forward, alert but unafraid. In that moment, looking into the Mustang's clear, intelligent eyes, Jaden realized something profound. Their journey together had transformed them both. The terrified, wounded animal from the roadside had become a being of dignity and courage. And Jaden, the lonely, silent boy who'd lost everything, had found his voice. When dawn broke over the valley, they were ready. Montgomery's convoy was spotted approaching the reservation's main entrance. A procession of black SUVs, horse trailers, and tribal police vehicles co-opted through influence or intimidation. Emma, looking over the final preparations for their resistance, received an unexpected message on her phone. "Sarah's videos have gone viral overnight," she announced, showing Jaden the screen. "Over 1 million views. Warner Spirit Free is trending nationwide. As the first vehicles appeared at the valley's hidden entrance, Jaden stood with Spirit in the morning light, their shadows stretching long across the ground. The Mustang remained calm beside him, trusting the human who had never betrayed that trust. "Whatever happens," Jaden promised softly, "I won't let them take your freedom again." The attorney who had delivered Montgomery's offer the previous day watched the video of Jaden's refusal with a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration. "He declined $1 million for a horse," he reported into his phone, said the animal wasn't his property to sell. On the other end of the line, Charles Montgomery's voice was cold with fury. "You may have won in the court of public opinion, but I have judges in my pocket. Within 24 hours, I'll have a court order that not even your precious live broadcast can circumvent." The dawn air carried the scent of sage and dust as Montgomery's convoy approached the valley entrance. The black SUVs moved in formation, sunlight glinting off tinted windows and polished metal. Behind them, the horse trailer loomed like a mobile prison, its purpose unmistakable. Jaden stood at the center of the gathering resistance, Spirit beside him, both of them calm in the face of the coming storm. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, adjusting her camera settings for the live stream that would broadcast the confrontation to thousands of waiting viewers. Jaden nodded, his hand resting lightly on Spirit's golden neck. The Mustang's muscles rippled beneath his touch, alert but not fearful. In the weeks since their first encounter, Spirit had transformed from a terrified fugitive into a being of quiet dignity. His wounds had healed, leaving only the telling brand on his flank as evidence of his captivity. "Remember," Emma said, joining them with her tablet in hand, "we're already live to over 50,000 viewers. Everything that happens here will be witnessed." Around them, members of the tribal community had gathered in silent solidarity. What had begun as Jaden's solitary act of compassion had evolved into something much larger, a stand against the commodification of life itself. Elders stood shoulder to shoulder with young activists, their presence a living barrier between Montgomery's forces and the valley that sheltered Spirit. The lead SUV stopped at the natural gateway formed by two towering rock formations. The driver's door opened, and Charles Montgomery emerged, his tall frame unfolding with deliberate grace. Despite the early hour, he was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His silver hair caught the morning sun, creating a deceptive halo effect around features hardened by decades of getting exactly what he wanted. "Quite the reception committee," Montgomery remarked, his Texas drawl coating each word with false warmth. "I'd have sent ahead for coffee if I'd known we were having a gathering." Frank Redcloud stepped forward, his weathered face impassive. "This is Navajo land, Mr. Montgomery. Sacred land. You have no authority here." Montgomery smiled thinly, gesturing to a man in a dark suit who approached with a leather portfolio. "Actually, I do. Federal Judge Harmon signed this order yesterday evening. It supersedes tribal jurisdiction in cases of interstate property theft." He accepted the document and held it up. "I'm here to recover what's legally mine." Emma moved forward, her legal training evident in her composed demeanor. "We've seen your permits, Mr. Montgomery. They don't match the brand on Spirit's flank. You've been capturing Mustangs outside your authorized zones, federal lands where no roundups are permitted." Montgomery's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that her words had found their mark. "That's an interesting theory. Unsubstantiated, of course." His gaze shifted to Spirit, standing proudly beside Jaden. "My property appears to be in good health, at least. I'm prepared to be generous about this unfortunate situation. No charges pressed, no questions asked." Jaden felt Spirit tense beside him, the Mustang's extraordinary sensitivity, allowing him to read the threat beneath Montgomery's polished veneer. He placed his hand gently on the golden neck, a silent reassurance that traveled through touch. Immediately, Spirit's breathing steadied, his trust in Jaden overriding his instinctual fear. "He's not property," Jaden said, his voice quiet but carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "He's a living being with his own will." Montgomery's expression hardened. "Poetic, but legally irrelevant." That animal represents a substantial investment. Its bloodline alone is worth more than most people here will earn in a decade. He snapped his fingers, and men in tactical gear began to emerge from the other vehicles. I've been patient. That ends now. Sarah stepped closer to Jaden, her camera capturing every moment. We're broadcasting live to more than 70,000 viewers, Mr. Montgomery. Everything that happens here will be seen nationwide. Good, Montgomery replied coldly. Then everyone can witness the proper enforcement of property rights. He turned to the uniformed tribal police officers who had accompanied his convoy. Officers, I believe you're familiar with the federal statute regarding stolen livestock. Please execute your duty. The officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, caught between tribal loyalty and the official documents Montgomery wielded like weapons. One of them, a young man with a name badge reading J. Begay, stepped forward reluctantly. Sir, given the circumstances and the public nature of this situation, perhaps there's a compromise. There is no compromise with theft, Montgomery interrupted sharply. Either you do your job, or my men will do it for you. He gestured to the tactical team now forming a loose perimeter around the gathering. Mariah Whitecloud pushed through the crowd to stand beside her son. My father worked 30 years for the Bureau of Land Management, she said, her voice steady despite the tension. He taught me to recognize legal permits. Yours are forgeries, Mr. Montgomery. The authorization codes don't match federal formats. Montgomery's facade cracked slightly, a flicker of genuine anger crossing his features. Your personal opinions about documentation hardly constitute evidence, madam. But these do, Emma interjected, stepping forward with her tablet. We've been compiling evidence for months. Your operations in Three Sisters Canyon were never authorized. The coordinates on Spirit's brand prove he was captured there. Federal land where all Mustang populations are protected. Sarah turned her camera to capture the growing crowd of tribal members and supporters. 50 tribal witnesses saw the coordinates on that brand. Another 100,000 are watching online right now. Montgomery's jaw tightened as he took in the situation. The cameras, the witnesses, the evidence being broadcast in real time. With a barely perceptible nod to his security team, he changed tactics. This legal matter could drag through courts for years, he said smoothly. Or we could resolve it simply. He turned to face Jaden directly. The animal clearly responds to you. But animals don't have legal rights. They have owners. Let's settle this the old-fashioned way. He pointed to Spirit. Let him choose. A murmur ran through the crowd. Montgomery signaled, and one of his handlers approached with a bucket, the distinctive aroma of molasses and grain wafting from it, a powerful attractant for horses. No tricks, Montgomery continued. Just choice. If he comes to me or my men, we leave with him. If he stays with you. He hesitated, calculating. I'll withdraw my claim. Frank and Emma exchanged concerned glances. Such a test seemed simple but carried enormous risk. Spirit's traumatic associations with Montgomery's operations might trigger unpredictable reactions. Jaden looked into Spirit's eyes, reading the intelligence there, the awareness that something significant was happening. Over their weeks together, they had developed a communication that transcended conventional understanding, not dominance or obedience, but partnership based on mutual respect. Okay, Jaden agreed quietly. Let him choose. Montgomery smiled coldly. Excellent. A sensible approach at last. The handler placed the bucket of feed midway between Montgomery's group and where Jaden stood. Another man appeared with carrots and apples, their fresh scent carrying on the morning breeze, powerful temptations for any horse, especially one who had known hunger. Jaden removed the light halter from Spirit's head, his movements deliberate, fingers lingering for a moment against the golden coat. Your choice, he whispered, the phrase that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Always your choice. Spirit stood perfectly still, nostrils flaring as he processed the scents and sounds around him. His ears swiveled, catching Montgomery's voice, then returning to focus on Jaden. Years of evolution had honed the Mustang's ability to detect threat and sincerity, to distinguish between what appeared to be offered and what truly was. For a long, tense minute, no one moved. Montgomery's handler rattled the grain bucket enticingly. Spirit's ears flicked toward the sound, his head lifting slightly. "He knows quality when he smells it," Montgomery remarked confidently. Spirit took a step forward, then another, moving deliberately toward the center of the improvised arena. The Mustang's gait was smooth, powerful, no trace remaining of the injuries that had once left him collapsed by the roadside. He approached the bucket, nostrils widening to take in the rich aroma of the grain. Montgomery's smile widened. Hunger always wins over sentiment. But Spirit didn't stop at the food. After a cursory sniff, he continued forward, approaching Montgomery and his handlers. The tension in the crowd was palpable as the golden Mustang stood before the man who claimed ownership of him. Montgomery reached out, his manicured hand extended toward Spirit's muzzle. "That's right," he murmured. "You remember who provides." Spirit remained motionless, studying Montgomery with an intensity that seemed to penetrate the man's carefully constructed facade. Then, deliberately, the Mustang turned away. With unhurried dignity, he walked directly back to Jaden, bypassing the food entirely. When he reached the young Navajo, Spirit lowered his head and pressed his muzzle against Jaden's chest in a gesture of unmistakable choice. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft whirring of Sarah's camera as it captured the moment. In the background, Emma's tablet displayed comment after comment flooding in from viewers witnessing the scene in real time. "I believe that concludes our demonstration," Frank said quietly, satisfaction evident in his voice. Montgomery's expression darkened, the carefully maintained veneer of civility cracking. "This proves nothing," he snapped. "Animals don't make legally binding decisions." Emma stepped forward, her phone held high. "Actually, Mr. Montgomery, you set the terms yourself. We have it recorded. You agreed to withdraw your claim if the horse chose Jaden." "A verbal agreement under duress isn't binding," Montgomery retorted, signaling to his security team. "Enough theatrics. Secure my property." As the tactical team moved forward, Sarah raised her voice. "We're still broadcasting live to over 80,000 people, Mr. Montgomery. Are you ordering your men to seize an animal that just clearly demonstrated his preference, after you publicly agreed to abide by that choice?" Montgomery hesitated, acutely aware of the cameras capturing his every move, the witnesses whose testimony would be difficult to discredit. With visible effort, he regained his composure. "This isn't over," he said coldly. "You may have won the publicity battle today, but I have resources you can't imagine. There are other courts, other jurisdictions." He straightened his jacket with practiced precision. "Nobody challenges Charles Montgomery and wins. Not for long." As Montgomery and his entourage retreated to their vehicles, the gathered crowd erupted in celebration. Tribal members embraced, elders nodded in solemn approval, and volunteers who had traveled from across the state cheered. Throughout it all, Spirit remained calmly at Jaden's side, seemingly unaffected by the commotion around them. "You did it," Mariah whispered, embracing her son. "You stood up to him, and you won." Jaden shook his head slightly, his hand resting on Spirit's golden neck. "We did it. All of us together." He looked into the Mustang's intelligent eyes. "Especially you." Emma approached, her expression serious despite the victory. Montgomery wasn't bluffing about his resources. This was just the first battle in what could be a long war. "Then we'll keep fighting," Sarah replied, reviewing the footage she had captured. "The images of Spirit's choice are already going viral. Public opinion is turning against Mustang roundups across the West." As the convoy disappeared in a cloud of dust, Jaden led Spirit to the small lake at the valley's center. Away from the celebration, in the quiet sanctuary of water and stone, the young man and the golden Mustang stood together in a moment of shared peace. Not as master and servant, but as partners who had chosen each other against overwhelming odds. "This isn't over," Jaden murmured, echoing Montgomery's threat but infusing the words with determination rather than menace. "But whatever comes next, we face it together." "This isn't over," Jaden murmured, echoing Montgomery's threat, but infusing the words with determination rather than menace. But whatever comes next, we face it together. The morning after Montgomery's retreat, the valley buzzed with activity. Emma had transformed Frank's modest cabin into an impromptu command center, her laptop surrounded by volunteers coordinating their next moves. Legal documents covered every available surface as she directed a team of remote attorneys who had offered their services pro bono after witnessing the confrontation online. "The clock is ticking," Emma announced, pushing her hair back from her forehead. Montgomery wasn't bluffing about using other legal channels. "We have maybe 24 hours before he returns with different papers from a friendlier judge." Sarah nodded, uploading carefully selected footage from yesterday's standoff. Her blog had gained over 50,000 followers overnight, and major news networks were requesting interviews. "I'm framing this as a fundamental question about how we relate to other species," she explained, adjusting her camera settings. "Not just a dispute over one horse, but a challenge to the entire system of commodifying living beings." Outside, Jaden sat cross-legged on a sun-warmed rock, watching Spirit graze nearby. The Mustang moved with increasing confidence, occasionally venturing closer to the resident herd that inhabited the valley. Though still cautious, he no longer showed the extreme vigilance of their early days together, a testament to how far his healing had progressed. "He looks stronger every day," Mariah observed, joining her son. She handed him a mug of coffee, steam rising into the cool morning air. "Inside and out." Jaden nodded, noting how Spirit's ears now remained relaxed more often than pricked in alarm. "The nightmares are less frequent." At Mariah's questioning look, he explained, "Sometimes he dreams. His legs twitch and he makes these soft sounds. In the beginning he'd wake up terrified, but now he settles himself." "Like someone else I know," Mariah said quietly, her eyes reflecting the weight of years lost to addiction. "Healing isn't linear. It comes in waves." Their moment of reflection was interrupted when a tribal police vehicle appeared at the valley entrance. Officer Joseph B. Gay emerged, his expression grim as he approached Emma's makeshift headquarters. "Montgomery's people are moving faster than we anticipated," he reported once everyone had gathered. "They filed emergency motions in 3 different jurisdictions. And there's something else. FBI agents arrived at the tribal administration building an hour ago." A tense silence fell over the group until Emma's phone chimed with an incoming message. Her eyes widened as she read the screen. "It's from my contact at the Justice Department," she said, looking up with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "A whistleblower inside Montgomery Enterprises submitted documentation to federal prosecutors this morning, detailed records of systematic bribery of BLM officials to obtain illegal Mustang capture permits." Sarah immediately began typing on her laptop. "I need to get this online before Montgomery's people can suppress it." "There's more," Emma continued, scrolling through the message. The whistleblower included internal emails, ordering the falsification of environmental impact studies and— She paused, her voice hardening. "Instructions for the secret disposal of Mustangs deemed commercially non-viable after capture." Jaden felt a chill run through him, his eyes automatically seeking Spirit among the grasses. The golden Mustang had paused in his grazing, head raised as if sensing the shift in energy among the humans. "Who's the whistleblower?" Frank asked. Emma shook her head. "They're remaining anonymous for now, but they've provided enough documentation to trigger a federal investigation." Over the next several hours, news of the developing scandal spread rapidly. Sarah's carefully curated videos, combined with the whistleblower's revelations, created a perfect storm that even Montgomery's considerable influence couldn't contain. Major environmental organizations issued statements condemning the Mustang roundups, and animal rights activists organized protests outside Montgomery Enterprises offices in multiple cities. By evening, the first news vans had arrived at the reservation boundary, reporters seeking interviews with the Navajo horse whisperer who had defied a billionaire. Tribal leaders, recognizing the opportunity to highlight broader issues of sovereignty and environmental justice, established a media area well away from the sacred valley where Spirit remained protected. Emma coordinated with attorneys across 3 states, building legal firewalls against Montgomery's attempts to regain access to the reservation. Sarah managed the public narrative, ensuring that Spirit's story remained connected to the larger issues of wild horse preservation and indigenous rights. In the midst of this whirlwind, Jaden maintained his focus on Spirit. While others fought the legal and public opinion battles, his responsibility remained what it had always been, providing the steady presence that anchored the Mustang's continuing recovery. At sunset, he took Spirit for their daily walk along the valley's perimeter. These quiet journeys had become a ritual, a time when both could process the day's events through movement and companionship rather than words. "I never expected any of this," Jaden said softly as they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. Spirit stood beside him, ears pricked forward, taking in the panoramic view. "I just wanted to help you heal." The Mustang turned his head, intelligent eyes meeting Jaden's in what felt remarkably like understanding. Over their weeks together, Spirit had developed an almost uncanny ability to read Jaden's emotional state, offering his presence as silent support during moments of stress or uncertainty. As darkness fell, they returned to find Frank lighting a ceremonial fire. Several tribal elders had gathered, their faces solemn in the flickering light. "News has reached us," Frank explained as Jaden approached. "Montgomery suffered a stroke this afternoon after federal agents arrived at his corporate headquarters with search warrants. His condition is serious." The announcement landed heavily. Despite everything Montgomery represented, wishing harm on another being went against the values that had guided their resistance. "The spirits judge all actions in their time," Hostine Begay observed quietly. "Our responsibility is to continue our own path with clear hearts." 2 days later, the Washington Post published a comprehensive investigation revealing the network of corruption connecting Montgomery Enterprises to officials within the Bureau of Land Management. Documents obtained through Freedom of Information requests showed systematic falsification of environmental reports, illegal capture operations in protected areas, and the quiet disappearance of hundreds of Mustangs that had been documented during roundups but never appeared in subsequent records. Emma burst into the cabin where Jaden was helping his mother organize supplies for the growing number of supporters camping near the valley. "Turn on the news," she said breathlessly. "It's happening." On the small television, they watched as FBI agents escorted 3 suits-clad executives from Montgomery Enterprises headquarters in Houston. The crawling text at the bottom of the screen reported that federal prosecutors had filed multiple charges related to bribery, environmental violations, and fraud. "They've accepted plea deals," Emma explained, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "They're cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences, which means they're giving up Montgomery," Mariah finished, understanding the legal strategy from her pre-addiction work in corporate accounting. The fall of Montgomery's empire happened with startling swiftness once the initial cracks appeared. Investors abandoned the company as stock prices plummeted. Political allies distanced themselves as more evidence emerged of systematic corruption. Montgomery himself, recovering from his stroke in a private hospital, faced multiple federal indictments once his medical condition stabilized. 2 years later, the transformation was complete. The federal judge overseeing the case made an unprecedented ruling. All lands illegally acquired by Montgomery Enterprises in protected areas would be converted into a permanent sanctuary for wild Mustangs, to be co-administered by the Bureau of Land Management and the Navajo Nation. The Spirit's Freedom Canyon, as it came to be known, quickly developed into an internationally recognized center for conservation and education. The valley that had once hidden a single golden Mustang now provided sanctuary for dozens of rescued horses, each with their own story of trauma and recovery. Jaden, now a biology conservation student at the University of Arizona on a full scholarship, divided his time between studies and managing the sanctuary's innovative programs. His approach to horse rehabilitation had attracted attention from veterinarians, behavioral scientists, and traditional trainers alike, all curious about methods that produced results without breaking the animal's spirit. On a clear autumn afternoon, Jaden stood in the center of the sanctuary's demonstration area. A small crowd gathered on benches arranged in a semicircle. Before him, Spirit, now a magnificent 4-year-old stallion, moved with fluid grace, responding to cues so subtle they were nearly invisible to observers. The traditional approach to Mustang training involves domination, Jaden explained to the audience of students, ranchers, and horse enthusiasts, breaking their will through physical control. But what we've found is that trauma doesn't heal through more trauma. Trust doesn't grow from fear. He demonstrated as he spoke, showing how Spirit responded to changes in his breathing, to the slightest shift of weight or intention. There was no shouting, no force, just the culmination of thousands of hours of patient communication building a language unique to their partnership. Each horse is different, Sarah added from where she stood at the edge of the arena. Now the sanctuary's resident veterinarian, she had established a clinic specializing in non-invasive healing techniques. But they all respond to respect, to being seen as individuals rather than objects to be controlled. In the years since their first desperate meeting on a rain-soaked highway, Spirit had matured into a natural leader. He now headed a small herd of rescued Mustangs, showing particular patience with the most traumatized newcomers. Observers noted how he would stand beside recently arrived horses during thunderstorms or helicopter flyovers, experiences that triggered terror in those who had survived roundups, his calm presence teaching by example that safety was possible. Emma Red Cloud, having completed her law degree with honors, had established a nonprofit dedicated to protecting wildlands and indigenous rights. Her organization, headquartered at the sanctuary, provided legal support to tribes throughout the Southwest facing environmental threats to their territories. Frank, now respected nationally as an elder statesman of indigenous wisdom, led traditional ceremonies that attracted visitors from around the world seeking to reconnect with ancestral knowledge about human-animal relationships. His gentle guidance helped bridge cultural gaps, creating space for healing that extended beyond species boundaries. As the demonstration concluded, Jaden removed the light halter he occasionally used during educational sessions. Spirit, understanding the gesture, lowered his head in a silent invitation. With practiced ease, Jaden mounted the stallion's bare back, and together they cantered toward the open expanse of the canyon, two free spirits moving as one. Mariah, watching from beside Frank, sighed contentedly. I never understood what my mother said about horses being messengers between worlds. Now I see. Frank smiled, his ancient eyes gleaming with wisdom. It isn't just about horses and humans. It's about remembering that all true healing comes from recognition. They recognized each other, two broken souls who together formed something complete. On the horizon, silhouetted against the flaming sky, man and horse became a single form, indistinguishable from each other, not master and servant, but partners in a dance as old as time itself. Below them, a new generation of young people worked with traumatized horses, learning that the deepest wounds can become bridges to the most meaningful connections.